The Bible and Archaeology, the Great Civilizations of the Past. Part 2, Egypt. Episode 1, How did Egyptian civilization begin? In the previous documentary, we journeyed through the majestic lands of Sumer, Assyria, and Babylon, exploring how the imposing ziggurats, enigmatic inscriptions, and archaeological findings shed light on biblical accounts related to Mesopotamia. A journey that allowed us to connect ancient texts with the vestiges of the first great civilizations. Now, in this new installment of The Bible and Archaeology, the Great Civilizations of the Past, we will immerse ourselves in the fascinating world of Egypt, the cradle of enigmas and wonders. We will explore how biblical accounts offer us unique perspectives on the rise of this great civilization, and how discoveries and circumstantial evidence confirm these narratives. Given the richness and diversity of biblical accounts linked to Egyptian history and archaeology, we have decided to structure this second part of the series, The Bible and Archaeology, the Great Civilizations of the Past, in episodes. This will allow us to explore each narrative with the depth and attention that its historical relevance deserves. Join us on this fascinating journey through time to the discovery of our roots, the roots of humanity. What do the pyramids, hieroglyphic inscriptions, and ancient papyri reveal about the origins of Egypt? What connections can we draw between biblical accounts and the vestiges of an empire that marked the dawn of humanity? In this first episode, we will decipher these unknowns and discover how ancient texts and archaeology complement each other to offer us a richer look at our past. Join us on this journey through the land of the pharaohs and delve into the secrets that the biblical record and Egypt still hold. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring together the great civilizations of the past. The Bible and the origin of Egyptian civilization. Surprising connections. In the biblical narrative, we find from a very early age reminiscences of the beginning of Egyptian civilization. In our documentary, The Disappearance of the First Civilization in History, we saw how humanity had a new beginning from the family of Noah, his sons, and their respective wives. It is interesting to note that, for all the time that Noah's family built the ark, apparently about 40 or 50 years, there were no new births in Noah's family, a behavior that we could relate to responsible procreation, that is, in view of the great catastrophe announced by divine revelation and the immense work involved in building a huge wooden vessel of 40,000 cubic meters. Having children would have complicated things. On the other hand, immediately after the flood, obeying the divine command to multiply, Noah's family grew exponentially. Thus, in chapter 10 of the book of Genesis, we find the composition of the 70 post-Diluvian families, or better known as the Table of Nations, for the reason that supposedly all nations, those that arose and disappeared throughout history, and those that today populate our charming planet, originated from these 70 post-Diluvian families. In our documentary, The Bible and Archaeology, the Great Civilizations of the Past, Part 1, Mesopotamia, we have seen that using the biblical genealogical records, we have been able to identify the origin of the peoples of Lower Mesopotamia in the region of Sumer, or the plain of Shinar, when the biblical narrative identifies Nimrod, son of Cush, grandson of Ham, great-grandson of Noah, as the founder of the first cities of Lower Mesopotamia. It seems that after the construction of the Tower of Babel, Nimrod extended his dominion to the territory of Assyria, and there built Nineveh and Rehoboth-ir, and Calah and Resen. Since Assyria must have received its name from Ashur, the son of Shem, Nimrod, grandson of Ham, invaded the Semitic territory. So family disputes over succession have a distant origin. Nimrod was the son of Ashur's cousin. Also, we have traced the origin of the Assyrian Empire through the line of descent of Ashur, son of Shem, grandson of Noah, and analyzed some biblical accounts with their corresponding Assyrian imperial records that appear in the tablets found in Nineveh. These surprising correspondences between documented history and the biblical narrative encourage us to ask ourselves, is it possible to use the record of chapter 10 of Genesis to identify the beginning of Egyptian civilization? Let's see. In Genesis chapter 10 verse 6 we read, "The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan." We note that among the sons of Ham, probably the youngest of Noah's 3 sons, a certain Mizraim is mentioned. In this regard, we must highlight the fact that in the Septuagint, the first translation of the Hebrew Scriptures into Greek, made for the benefit of Greek-speaking Jews that began in Egypt in the 3rd century before our era, and was completed in the following century. The translators, whenever they found the word Mizraim in Hebrew, and it referred to a nation, translated it into Greek as Egypt. Even more interesting is to note that today, in the Arabic language, Egypt is called Misr. Misr shares the same Semitic root as the Hebrew term Mitzrayim, indicating a deep historical and linguistic link between the two languages. Further on, in chapter 10 of Genesis, verses 13 and 14, we also read, "Mizraim was the father of Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtuhim, Pathrusim, Casluhim, from whom came the Philistines, and Caphtorim." Here we note that among the sons of Mizraim, a character associated with the Egyptian people, we find one worth distinguishing, Pathrusim. Apparently, this name is the plural form of Pathros. Generally, Pathros is related to Egypt. Most scholars associate the name Pathros with an Egyptian expression meaning land of the south, and which must refer to Upper Egypt. Upper Egypt is understood to be the region of the Nile Valley that extends from south of Memphis to Syene, modern-day Aswan, located at the first cataract of the Nile. The text of Isaiah 11:11, which predicts the return of the exiled Israelites from Egypt, that is, Mizraim in Hebrew, Pathros and Cush, seems to corroborate the location of Pathros in Upper Egypt, which bordered on the south with Cush, or Ethiopia. An Assyrian inscription of King Esarhaddon mentions them in the same order: Egypt, Musur, Patarisi, and Nubia, Kusu or Cush. In this inscription we find the Hebrew terms Mizraim and Pathrusim in the Akkadian language, respectively Musur and Patarisi. Ezekiel 29:14 seems to corroborate this thesis insofar as it declares, "And I will bring the captive Egyptians back to the land of Pathros, to their own land, and there they shall be a lowly kingdom." This text declares that the land of origin of the Egyptians would be Pathros, a region of Upper Egypt. In chapter 44 of the book of Jeremiah, Pathros is mentioned in the context of the Jews who emigrated to Egypt after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in the 6th century BC. Some of these Jews settled in Pathros, along with other regions such as Migdol and Memphis, both located in Upper Egypt. Extra-biblical sources coincide with what is stated in the biblical text. For example, Herodotus, in his work Histories, Book 2, describes the regions and origins of the Egyptians, differentiating between Upper Egypt, in the south, and Lower Egypt, in the north. Although he does not directly mention the Pathrusim or Pathros, his account confirms that Upper Egypt, which would correspond to Pathros, was considered the cradle of Egyptian civilization. The inhabitants of Upper Egypt were perceived as the original founders of Egyptian culture and religion. Also Manetho, an Egyptian priest and historian, in his Egyptiaca, History of Egypt, divides the Egyptian rulers into dynasties and connects the beginnings of Egypt with a pre-dynastic period dominated by groups established in the south, near Pathros. Although he does not mention the Pathrusim, he describes the importance of the region of Upper Egypt in the early development of civilization. In ancient Egyptian texts, Pathros could be related to the Egyptian term Pa-Taresi, which means the land of the south, and refers to Upper Egypt. This term is found in inscriptions from the New Kingdom period, especially in religious and administrative contexts. It is worth noting the graphic assonance between the Hebrew word patrusim and the Egyptian word pataresi. In the Targum, Aramaic interpretations of the Old Testament, in the Targums, Pathros is identified as a region in southern Egypt, linked to the descendants of Mizraim. This reinforces the connection between the Pathrusim and Upper Egypt. Flavius Josephus, a 1st-century Jewish historian, in Antiquities of the Jews, links Mizraim, the ancestor of the Egyptians, to the lands of Egypt. Although he does not explicitly mention the Pathrusim, his narrative about the descendants of Ham and Mizraim includes various groups that would have populated the area, probably including Pathros. Cosmas Indicopleustes, a 6th-century Christian explorer and writer, identified regions of southern Egypt as fundamental in the development of Egyptian civilization, influenced by Hamitic traditions, although he did not use the term Pathros directly. Classical sources such as Herodotus, Manetho, and Josephus, along with Hebrew traditions and Egyptian texts, reinforce the connection between Pathros, Upper Egypt, and the early development of Egyptian civilization. Although not all of them specifically mention the Pathrusim, the consensus points to Upper Egypt, Pathros, playing a crucial role in the historical and cultural origins of Egypt, in line with biblical descriptions. Everything seems to indicate that Pathros corresponds to Upper Egypt, a region south of Memphis that includes ancient cities such as Thebes, Waset, and Hermopolis, Kemenu. Upper Egypt is known for being the cradle of some of the oldest cultures of Egypt, which preceded the unification of the country in the early dynastic period. Upper Egypt played a crucial role in the formation of the religious beliefs of ancient Egypt. The city of Thebes, in particular, was an important center of the cult of the god Amun. Numerous temples and tombs of important pharaohs are located in this region, such as the Valley of the Kings near Thebes. Inscriptions and cultural evidence suggest that Upper Egypt had links with Semitic peoples and with migratory movements to and from Canaan, which could be related to the biblical stories related to Egypt. The biblical record narrates that the survivors of the flood gave a new beginning to humanity. In this video, letting ourselves be guided by the genealogy that appears in chapter 10 of the biblical book of Genesis, we have traveled through the different generations that gave rise to one of the most enigmatic civilizations of the past, the Egyptian civilization. Can we give a name to the first Egyptians? For secular history, going back so far in time, excavating sediments rich in samples and interpreting them is a complicated task. The biblical record, written thousands of years ago, indicates that a certain Pathros, son of Mizraim, grandson of Ham, and great-grandson of Noah, settled in southern Egypt. This would have occurred sometime after the flood mentioned in the Bible, possibly during the dispersion of the population of that time from Babel to different regions. Would a certain Pathros with his family, the Pathrusim, who settled in Upper Egypt, be among them? The historical, geographical, and temporal context seems to coincide. In conclusion, the biblical narrative, far from being a mere legend, presents a remarkable correspondence with the findings of historical research and the references of classical authors such as Herodotus, Manetho, Flavius Josephus, and Cosmas Indicopleustes. Once again, historical evidence reinforces the credibility and reliability of the biblical narrative. Genesis chapter 12 transports us to the first decades of the second millennium BC, when Abraham and Sarah faced the adversity of a famine in Canaan that led them to seek refuge in Egypt. Is there historical evidence to support this journey? Don't miss the next episode, Egypt and Abraham, Historical Footprints of the Biblical Narrative, where we will unravel this fascinating mystery. If you liked this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.